What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. Today we're going to be doing a full mastering breakdown. I'm going to show you the entire process from start to finish of how I master my own music. I'll cover topics like EQ, multiband compression, and limiting, and overall just give you some insight into the approach that I take to get my masters to a loud and competitive level while still maintaining that clean and polished sound that I had coming from the mix. So let's hop right in and get to it. All right, so first off, this is a song that I wrote and recorded and mixed myself. I actually did a full mix breakdown tutorial here on YouTube. So for those of you who haven't seen that, I'll go ahead and link that in the description. So this is kind of a part 2 to that video, but what I did was I actually exported the mix from the mix project and then imported it over here into a new session so that way we could just focus on the mastering. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the song. You'll see right here I have all of my mastering plugins turned on except for this loudness meter right here, but we'll leave that turned off and come back to that later. But I just want y'all to get a feel for the finished product. So let's go ahead and take a listen.
Excuse me, I did not know that you'd be the one that I could love. No, I thought I had it all figured out. Guess it was fate that brought you back around, falling, but you were right there to stop me from becoming unaware. I need your love and all of your light, tonight and every night. Promise me that you will stay. I need your love in every way. I finally found the words to say. You're my baby and I don't want you to go.
All right, so let's go ahead and just disengage all of the plugins on the master channel, and let's press play again right here in the chorus. And what we're gonna do is just pay attention over here to the meter and see where the mix is peaking at.
I did not know that you'd be the one that I could love. No, I thought I had it all figured out. Guess it was fate that brought you back around, falling.
Okay, so the mix is peaking at anywhere between -9 and like -7 dB, which is plenty of headroom for us for the mastering process. So first off, let's go ahead and turn the plugins off, and we'll basically just build the mastering chain plugin by plugin. So the first thing I did was I used this Ozone 9 dynamic EQ to kind of control some frequencies here in the mid-range. Now, the cool thing about dynamic EQs is that each frequency is only being turned down when it gets too loud. So it's basically like each frequency has its own compressor. Whereas with a regular EQ, if you pull down and dial back a frequency, it's always going to be set like that. And that can be a problem in mastering because you might make an EQ move thinking that something's overpowering to the ear, right? Maybe the bass or the kick are clashing. Well, what happens when the kick drum and the bass are, pulled out from the arrangement, maybe like during a pre-chorus or during a bridge? Then you're stuck there having this EQ point pulled down when it doesn't really need to be. So that's why I tend to use dynamic EQs a lot during the mastering phase. So let's go ahead and press play again. And what I'm gonna do is solo out some of these frequencies one by one so that way you can hear what I was hearing when I was mastering this song. You're gonna hear that these frequencies are just a little harsh, and that's why I wanted to dial them back a little bit.
I did not know that you'd be the Guess it was fate that brought you back around, falling. Your love and all of your light. Thought I had it all figured out. From becoming unaware, I need your love and all of your light, tonight and every night.
Okay, so hopefully you were listening on some studio monitors or headphones. What I was hearing was, this top frequency was pretty harsh, as well as these other two right here around the 600 hertz range. And then down here in the 300 hertz range, what I heard was a lot of mud. And I think that was coming from the bass, the kick, and kind of the low end of the vocal. All of those were meeting together and just kind of clashing and fighting for, that frequency range right there. And that's going to tend to happen in the mid range and in the low mids because you can do all you want in the mixing process. When you're joining together all these sounds and instruments, it's just going to get cluttered. And so having some type of control in the mastering process is really going to help clean things up. And again, it might look like we're taking out just 4 dB at all of these frequencies, but that's not really what's happening. When you press play, you're really only getting like half a dB of, compression on that frequency, right? Because if you look at the scale over here, -2 is right here. So I never saw any of these bands really going that low. So we're getting very minimal, dynamic control on these frequencies, but a little goes a long way during the mastering phase. Now, as far as the low end and the upper mids and the high end, I didn't hear any frequencies that were sticking out to my ear. But for those of you who are wondering, well, how do I find these frequencies that sound bad? Well, what you can do is create an EQ point, and then you can either boost and sweep around until you hear, something sound bad, or what you can do is use the solo function, and that way you can really hone in on which frequency is causing problems. Now, just be careful when you're boosting like this and sweeping around, because you have to distinguish between a frequency sounding bad because you're turning it up and so it sounds weird compared to all the other frequencies, and being able to distinguish between that and a frequency just sounding bad. So this is only going to help amplify any issues, but you have to be careful when you're sweeping around and finding these frequencies. So let's go ahead and remove that EQ point. And the next thing that we have in the mastering chain, and this was something that I actually added a little bit later on in the process. It was kind of last minute, but I used the AMEC EQ 200. And as you can see, this looks like a very complicated plugin, and honestly it is. I tend to not use EQs like this, but this actually has a very nice analog top end brightness to it. So you can see right here on the high EQ section, that's the only section that's turned on for this EQ. And basically all I'm doing is adding a high shelf at 24,000 Hertz, and I'm boosting by 1.4 dB. So all this is doing is just adding that top end sheen and brightness to the overall mix to kind of just give it a little bit of clarity. So let's go ahead and take a listen. I'll turn the plugin on and off. What you're gonna find is it's very hard to kind of hear the difference. And that's really what you want. Everything needs to be subtle when you're mastering. You don't want to be making all these drastic changes, because every change you make is going to affect the whole entire mix. So every instrument, every vocal, every drum is going to be affected by the moves you make on the master channel. But all of these subtle changes will add up over the mastering process. And believe me, less is more when it comes to dealing with the entire mix.
I did not know that you'd be the one that I could love. No, I thought I had it all figured out. Guess it was fate that brought you back around, falling, but you were right there to stop me from becoming unaware. I need your love and all of your light, tonight and every night. Promise me that you will stay. I need your love in every way. I finally found.
Okay, so as I said, not a huge change, but honestly at 24,000 Hertz, the human ear is going to have a hard time hearing that. It's more of how it makes you feel when you turn the music on, right? It's going to have that brightness, it's going to have that sparkle, and honestly, it's just going to help with the sound. All right, so next up in the chain, we have the God Particle. So this is a plugin by Jason Joshua. He's a very famous mix engineer, and he uses this plugin always at all times on his mix bus. And basically what it does is you have like your input over here. So you typically want to hit the middle of this green like target area. So you can see that I boosted the input by 2 dB. So that way I brought my mix up to that level. And then here in the middle, you have this amount knob. So this is kind of like the magic knob, and you can really set that anywhere you want. I have it dialed back to 50%. And then over here, you have the multi-band compression section. So you have the lows, the mids, and the highs. So all three of these frequency sections are going to be compressed differently, right? So you're not just loading a compressor and compressing the entire mix as one. It's broken down into different frequency sections, and that way you can get a more clean type of compression. Now, what he recommends is that if your mix is hitting in the target area over here on the input of the plugin, then that should be the proper gain staging setup for the multiband compression. But if you press play and you notice that you're not hitting the target areas for the multiband compression, or you're not getting as much gain reduction as you'd like, you have these knobs right here to kind of push in and bring up that specific frequency range into the multiband compressor. And then lastly, you have the limiter, which I have turned off because I have limiting going on later on in the chain. So let's go ahead and just press play and take a listen.
I did not know that you'd be the one that I could love. No, I thought I had it all figured out. Guess it was fate that brought you back around. I did not know that you'd be the one that I could love. No, I thought I had it all figured out. Guess it was fate that brought you back around. I did not know that you'd be the one that I could love. No, I thought I had it all figured out. Guess it was fate that brought you back around.
Now you're obviously getting some added gain and volume added to your signal with this plugin. Things just got louder, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes on top of the multiband compression. So what I've heard is there's wave shaping and, analog harmonics, saturation of some sort. So to me, I really like the sound of this plugin, but I only have it set at 50%, right? So we're not getting the full effect. You can actually take this all the way up to 200% if you wanted to. But like I said, everything that I do in the mastering phase is going to be very subtle. So 50% is where I have it dialed in at. Now it's time to make our mix loud. So far, what we've done is we used a dynamic EQ to control certain frequencies that were sticking out to our ear and sounding harsh. We used an analog style EQ to boost the top end and add some brightness. Then we used the God particle for some multiband compression and added harmonics. And now it's time to basically drive our mix up and bring it up to a level where it's going to sound competitive against other songs. You don't want your song to come on after another song and yours be way quieter, right? You want your master to be loud. So what I'm going to do is use a limiter to bring that loudness level up. Now, a technique that I use a lot is to use multiple limiters to break up the limiting and gain reduction across those multiple limiters. You're basically splitting up the workload. This will ensure that one limiter isn't getting overworked, and it's just going to make the limiting process a lot cleaner. So the first limiter in the chain is going to be the Ozone 9 Vintage Limiter. And you can see right here, I have the modern algorithm mode selected, and I have the ceiling set at minus 0.3 decibels. So I don't want any signal going above minus 0.3 decibels. A lot of people set their ceiling at 0 decibels, but what you'll find is that sometimes you'll have intersample peaks that go above 0 decibels, which can result in some unwanted distortion and just some nasty artifacts. So to be safe, I set mine at minus 0.3. And then basically what I do is I play the master at the loudest section of the song, so usually the chorus, and I'll just drag this threshold down until I start to get about 1 to 1.5 dB of gain reduction. So let's go ahead and press play and see how this limiter sounds on the master. One thing to point out is that this limiter does have this character knob right here, and this just controls the attack and release times of the limiter. So I have it set pretty fast. But let's go ahead and take a listen. Now, since we are adding a limiter, things are going to get louder, so you might want to turn down your headphones or your studio monitors.
I did not know that you'd be the one that I could love. No, I thought I had it all figured out. Guess it was fate that brought you back around, falling, but you were right there to stop me from becoming unaware. I need your love and all of your light, tonight and every night.
All right, so I'm only getting about 1 decibel of gain reduction on this limiter. And to me, I don't want to go any further, right? If you push a limiter too hard and you pull this threshold down too far, you're basically going to start to hear like distortion. The low end's going to start sounding weird, and you're going to get some pumping effects because a limiter is essentially a compressor. So if you push it too hard, it's just not going to sound good. So be very subtle with your first limiter. Now, next up, we have the Ozone 9 Maximizer, and this is going to be the last tool that we use to drive our mix up into the ceiling. You can see over here on the left that they have multiple limiting modes. So I'm using IRC number 2. If you read the description, it says that it has clear and sharp limiting to preserve the peaks. Now, again, I have the ceiling set at minus 0.3 decibels on this limiter as well. I have true peak enabled because since this is the last limiter, I don't want anything going above the ceiling. No intersample peaks, nothing. So this is my safety net. And I only have the threshold pulled down by minus 1.5, right? Because with the other limiter, we really pushed our mix up really close to 0 decibels. In fact, we went past 0, but we had the limiter to kind of turn down those peaks. So we don't have to pull our threshold down as much on this limiter. And again, I had the character set at 2 for a fast attack and release time with this limiter. All right, so let's go ahead and press play again and take a listen to how this limiter is affecting the mix.
I did not know that you'd be the one that I could love. No, I thought I had it all figured out. Guess it was fate that brought you back around, falling, but you were right there to stop me from becoming unaware. I need your love and all of your light, tonight and every night.
All right, so we're getting about 1 to 1.5 dB of gain reduction on this final limiter. So if you add up the total gain reduction across both limiters, you're only limiting about 2 to 3 decibels total. Now that's typically as far as I want to go with the limiting. Anything past that and you'll start to hear the limiter give out and start adding artifacts and distortion, and you'll hear a pumping effect. So overall, your music's just not going to sound good if you hit the limiter too hard. Now, I do see a lot of people making the mistake of over limiting their music. And the reason they're doing this is because they want to get their mix loud. But a lot of the loudness is going to come from the way that you mix the song, right? If y'all watch my mix session in the tutorial, I did a lot of clipping and a lot of limiting in the mix, right, to control the peaks. So that way, when I got to this final mastering stage, I didn't have to work this final limiter so hard. It had a more consistent sound to work with. As opposed to not having any peak control in your mix, then this final limiter doesn't know what to do with all these peaks. Now, if you're struggling to get a loud master, you might want to go back to the mix and add things like parallel compression, saturation, and clipping. All of those things are going to help you achieve a louder mix. Now, speaking of loudness, let's go ahead and pull up this loudness meter right here and run our master through it to see how loud we are in terms of LUFS.
I did not know that you'd be the one that I could love. No, I thought I had it all figured out. Guess it was fate that brought you back around, falling, but you were right there to stop me from.
All right, so the loudest section of the song is hitting at -7 to -8 LUFS, which for me is a great target to get my masters to in order to stay competitive as far as loudness goes. Okay, so I went ahead and deleted the loudness plugin because you don't want to have that turned on and enabled whenever you're doing your final export. But a quick tip is that you might want to have your loudness meter pulled up whenever you're setting your limiters, so that way you kind of know where you're at as far as the loudness goes. Now, one last thing that I want to talk about is on the final limiter, I have the dither section turned on. Anytime that you are reducing your bit depth, so here in FL Studio, we're working in 32-bit float. So if I'm exporting at 24-bit, which I am, then you're going to want to add some dithering, which is basically just some very low level like white noise that's going to cover up any type of artifacts in your song that occur from reducing your bit depth. So these are the settings that I use. I have a low dither amount. I'm exporting at 24-bit depth. And I'm also using a low noise shaping curve. Now, not all limiters are going to have a dither section, but you should have some type of option to add dithering to your final master on the export page. I'm not sure how other DAWs do it, but in FL Studio, there is a dithering selector or selection that you can choose. Now, the only other thing to kind of talk about would be how you're going to fade out the song. So what I did in the mix was I actually automated the master volume fader, and you can see here at the end of the song that the volume just fades out to 0. You really want to be conscious and aware of how the song is going to end, right? If there's some type of reverb tail or delay effect still going on, you want to slowly fade those out to 0 volume. You don't just want it to end abruptly. So if I was going to export this master right now, what I would do would be File, Export, WAV file, select where you want to save this to. So we're going to basically title this Tonight and Every Night. Can't really type because I got a microphone in front of me. Tonight and Every Night Master. Okay, let's save it. So this is our final export screen. And these are my settings that I would typically always use. So I have the full song selected. That's what we want to export. We're cutting the remainder of the tail, right? Because I already faded out the tail to 0 during the mix. Then I'm selecting the wave file. I have my wave bit depth at 24 bits. That's what I choose to do. Some people go down to 16, but I think 24 bit is higher quality. And all streaming sites are now accepting 24 bit, I believe. So that's just what I export at. Always make sure you have stereo files selected. You don't want your final master to be in mono. I got the resampling at the highest quality available, high quality for all plugins selected. Trim PDC silence, so plug-in delay compensation. You want it to remove that initial silence that basically aligns all your audio that's using plugins. Enable insert effects. If you had any effects going on a mixer channel, you would want that turned on. I just always have that turned on. And then enable master effects. You definitely want that turned on, or else all those plugins that we worked on are going to be useless. So make sure you have that turned on, and then you would just hit start and export your file. All right, so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.